Hello again everyone, welcome back to another episode of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. My name is Mars and today we're going to be talking about the Beast of the Dark 2 fight. And a lot of people requested a little bit of commentary or explanation behind my team building on this fight. So real quick before the fight gets any further, I am going to pause real quick on the builds, so that we can talk about that and then jump into the fight. So the first person that we have here is Bosch, and I'm using him as my physical cover tank. You can use any physical cover tank, though in this case I definitely recommend following along an evasion build, which is what I used. If you can't do that, it's not a problem. Just be aware that the bosses do buff themselves frequently or put break resistance up frequently, which can make tanking them pretty irritating. So evade, at least with this party build, is recommended. The other thing that Bosch has equipped is a lot of elemental resistance. He has quite a bit of fire and dark, as well as water and wind, as well as a little bit of thunder, which will help as well. And Bosch's role is entirely just covering physical damage, and he also is here for some defense breaks against Ifrit when it's time to burn him down. Otherwise, he doesn't do much besides the physical cover, so you can replace him with any other physical cover tank. And you just want to make sure you have that elemental resistance. And so as we move on to I believe Folka is the next party member. Yep. Speaking of elemental resistance, it is very important for this fight, and as you can see on Folka as well, I have a lot of elemental resistance equipped. You want to go for 200% of fire and dark together after buffs, as well as 200% water and wind after buffs. And if you're dealing thunder damage to Siren, you also want some thunder resistance on your party as well. So it is extremely elemental resistance intensive, but it definitely is attainable. And if you have somebody like Marie who can cover all of the elements and she can do it by 70%, once you get her rotation up and going, she really is a good option to help you with your survivability. Now the other thing that I've done with Folka with this particular build, this is an idea borrowed from Sinzar. He equipped Carbuncle with Barfiraga on her, as well as dual cast, and this will allow her to do some healing or dispelling in addition to buffing fire resistance on the party by 70%. This is super handy because within the rest of my party I don't have a lot of fire resistance options, so super handy for really beefing out some of that elemental resistance. Now speaking of elemental resistance, I've also brought along Nickel. He's got a lot of equipped resistance, dark and fire, as well as wind and water. And he's in the party almost exclusively for some of those elemental buffs. And then when we transition from killing Siren to killing Ifrit, he's going to be a water imbuer for my damage dealers. So that's kind of, and you'll see how this interplay works together because I'm also bringing Ignis, which I'm very excited about, because with Ignis and Nickel together, I get to use two very cool support units that complement each other very much. So for the first half of the fight, when I'm fighting Siren, Nickel's job is exclusively for buffing elemental resistance, as well as providing buffs or removing breaks or taking care of MP. And then once Siren dies, it switches and Ignis takes over that role. He's going to handle elemental resistance, he's going to handle some of those buffs and things like that. And the reason for this is because both Nickel and Ignis have imbues. Ignis's imbues are for thunder, fire, and ice, and in this case we want to use thunder, and that's going to be used against Siren. So Ignis is up during the first phase simply for the imbues. You could use him to combo with any damage dealer. It doesn't have to be 2B, that's just who I used. And in 2B's case, of course, she could self-imbue thunder, and you wouldn't need Ignis for that. But for the sake of modeling, that's kind of what I went with. So he can dual cast his imbues right out of the gate, and makes it super nice for getting your damage dealers ready. Now, Nickel has water imbues, and water is the preferred element against Ifrit, so that's the reason for the swap, is that Nickel will do our elemental resistance and buffing against Siren, and Ignis will do imbues, and then once Siren is dead, they trade jobs. Nickel goes to imbuing, and Ignis goes to that elemental resistance buffing, and, you know, off healing, and all that other good stuff that comes with support. Now, he, like everyone else, is equipped with a high amount of elemental resistance. You just gotta get that dark fire, water, wind as high as you can. And then moving on to the damage dealers, same story. You do have to give up on attack. you can't really big wiener this one the same way that you can the other ones. You gotta get that dark and fire up real high, water and wind real high. You can see this 2B is extremely high on the elemental resistance, and she's also got some thunder. But if you look at my friend unit 2B, she is kind of shy on the thunder resistance, which makes it so that she's squishy to thunder damage. And if you watched the original video, you saw that it was her demise. That being said, totally possible to recover this fight, and in fact on the stream I was able to recover a near wipe with Bosch only. He was the only surviving member of the party. So, for the first turn of the fight, you do have to have charm resistance up on your party. You can use Lakshmi for this. I used Folka. You're going to get charm turn 1 if you do not do this, so you have to put up that charm resistance. Now, what the rest of my party is doing is Nickel's prepping some elemental resistance, Bosch is physical covering, Ignis is preparing for imbues, and the 2Bs are setting up for their damage rotation. Now, 2B can also function as a breaker in this fight, but breaks are pretty much irrelevant in this fight because we're, by and large, ignoring most of the damage. We're either evading it or we are resisting it. And this is the easiest way to deal with it because it's so common for these bosses to buff themselves, and it's so frustrating. I hated it so much. Anyways, on this second turn with Folka, we're going to go ahead and pop some healing with fire element resistance. This is handy for making it easier to survive the magic. And then because we have break resistance up with Folka, I'm using Nickel's stronger buffs, the ones that normally break your party. With Folka's break resistance, you can use those and not worry about breaking your own party. Ignis is here for some double thunder imbues on the 2B so that we can get started on some strong damage right away. And as you'll see, most of the time Bosch doesn't have a lot to do on his off turns. He kind of hangs out. He'll break Siren or he'll break Ifrit as necessary, and that's helpful for when the occasional attack gets through, but it's not necessary. Now you'll see 2B, even with all of that damage resistance on the boss is very resistant to damage right now. Those 2Bs popped 7% on Siren, and so impressive. I really love 2B for this fight and pretty much every other fight in the game. She has proven to be a real firecracker. And that counter that you just saw was the thunder damage. You can see it almost brought down our 2B friend because her thunder resistance is super low. But all the other magic damage we're resisting because we've got that super high fire, water, wind, and dark resist. And we kind of continue from there. Dispel is super handy to have on Folka as well, thanks to Carbuncle. I'll usually throw in a Dispel to remove thunder resistance buffs on Siren, so she would become immune to damage. But you can go ahead and Dispel that, easy peasy. Now, with Ignis, he doesn't have a lot to do on his off turns. His entire job is to maintain his, imbues, or they're called enhancement skills in his kit. And that's basically all he does. And you kind of keep this whole rotation going. There's not really any thresholds you have to watch out for with Siren. There's not really anything else you have to do. Just keep those elemental resistance buffs up. Keep the damage rolling out, keep everybody topped off. Don't forget to refresh your charm, and I believe stop comes out as well. I often forget about those things because when you're running a Folka, you've got all your bases covered when it comes to status ailments. So in that case, I don't remember exactly everything, but I am pretty sure stop comes out, so just be mindful of that as well. So yeah, Folka is recommended for that, but if you don't have her, Lakshmi's going to be your best friend. Honestly, she's one of the most important espers to invest in. Make sure you get those levels so that you can get both enhancements, because using both stop and charm resist on her is super helpful. So you'll see after several turns, Siren does drop her mitigation, and we are able to start damaging her more fully. Folka in this case is going to do her Dispel and Bar Fire again. I just like to keep those buffs fresh. If you find yourself going, I don't know what to do with this unit this turn, refresh their cover or refresh their buffs early. That way if something bad happens on the following turn, they have a free turn to be able to handle the situation. So if you need a Dispel, or you need a raise, or you need something else to happen, they're able to help you out with that. Ignis is gearing up for another set of imbues. The 2Bs have another turn where they're imbued with thunder, so they don't need it just yet. And you can see she's just chipping away nicely against Siren. No problems there. And anytime you see that heart icon go out, that's a charm attack. So again, I'm not 100% sure on the boss's rotation on this, because when your party is set up correctly for this fight, you don't have to know all the mechanics. Just remember to keep that charm resistance buff up. And if I had to choose anybody to put it on, I would probably put charm resistance up on perhaps Ignis, or you could do it on Folka as well, or whoever your healer is, because they don't have to put up the fire resistance on the first turn. It just helps you stay secure throughout the fight. You'll see I do it a lot. Do a lot of Dispel so that Siren's not buffed. Siren will buff her own defense and spirit, and that's super annoying. It really cuts into your damage. So a lot of times I'll do a Dispel with a heal, I'll do a Dispel with a Barfiraga, all sorts of combinations like that. And I'm pretty sure this is the turn where I regret not doing a Dispel with a heal, because I think my friend 2B goes down this turn. I don't 100% remember, but we're about to find out. And I'm still, you know, you can see me fumbling about with Ignis because I'm like, I don't remember what to do. I wasn't 100% sure. Oh, I remember why. I put up Calamity Border because I was worried about the other 2B dying. It's not until later that she goes down to the Thunder attack. And now that's something you do want to watch for. You'll see every 5 turns on the 5th turn, Siren and Ifrit are going to chain together. And that's something that you want to watch out for, because if your elemental resistances are not up, you will probably die, and it will hurt very, very much. Now you'll see on this turn, because we have our buffs up already, thanks to Nickel's elemental resistance buffs, you know, we're good. He's got a free turn to summon Phoenix, and Phoenix, and I believe it's, who is the other one? Ignis has the other Esper equipped. Anyways, summon 2 different Espers. Get those handled. It's pretty common for people like Ignis and Nickel to have free turns, especially once your elemental resistances are up, so they can handle that just fine for you. Now it has to be this turn that 2B goes down. I don't remember. I just remember being annoyed. Because I was like, crap, I should have healed her, because I was feeling confident. Because as you can see, she doesn't need to be healed as long as she has enough resistance. My 2B has enough resistance to not have to be healed at all, so not a problem. But this friendly 2B, not the same story. But the nice thing about this fight is that it is extremely recoverable. Like I said before, in my Twitch stream, I believe it was on Friday, last Friday, at least from the point of recording, Bosch was the last surviving member of the party. Everybody else was dead, Bosch was alive, and we had to break one of the mission parameters. We had to use an item. However, he was able to use a Phoenix down on Nickel, and then Nickel was able to summon Phoenix on the following turn and bring the entire party back. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why I feel like even though the elemental resistance requirements are super high on this fight is more enjoyable than Gilgamesh Kai in particular, because it's very recoverable. I would not say that this fight is forgiving. It is definitely challenging, but it is recoverable, which I think is a huge deal. If you make one mistake in Gilgamesh Kai, it's over, your party wipes. Oh yeah, and 2B goes down again. So I almost called the recording at this point because I was like, this 2B just keeps dying, but I'm sure you've noticed one of the biggest pain points with this fight is actually finding a friend unit who is equipped with the correct elemental resistances for you to survive. So if you're struggling with that, it sucks. I feel like the game should be more accommodating in that regard. Like, with such specific requirements, game, just let us take a 6th of our own unit in. Like, let me take 6 of my own units in, because then they can be geared correctly for it. But since we don't have that as a feature, I'd recommend, for those who need the units, go ahead and jump on the Discord. You can also look on Reddit. We've got lots of people with lots of units that they can share. So networking, that's how it's gonna that's what's gonna get you the friend units you need to get through this fight. So I was kind of annoyed because I was like, great, this turn 2B is actually up, but she's charmed. So luckily Folka's Limit Burst came to the rescue on this one, because it does remove Stop and Charm in addition to all other status ailments and healing. So it is quite the handy Limit Burst in that regard. So we did fully recover by this point. It was like, alright, everybody's up, everybody's alive, everybody is not snoozing or charmed by the boss. So let's get some buffs rolling again. Let's make sure everybody's got everybody's got everything taken care of, and then we get back into our rotation to deal damage. So anyways, that's one of the things I really love about this fight. It is recoverable. There's a lot of creative strategies that you can do with this. And, you know, it punishes you for your mistakes, but not so heavily that you can't recover and continue on for a clear, which I think is a great trait in a fight, even if it does have a really irritating gimmick of high elemental resistance in a world where the friends list is broken and, you know, getting that one friend who's geared right takes forever, you know. Giant frustration there, but overall I think it's a very smartly designed fight. It's a lot of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to the part where Siren dies, because things do change up a little bit. So just, you know, as you proceed through the fight, keep in mind every 5 turns the bosses chain up. Those are the turns that you have to have your elemental resistance is real high, especially for fire and dark, because that shiz chains up and it hurts real bad. And it's not coverable, so you do have to handle it accordingly with the right elemental resistance. But we'll go ahead and zoom on ahead. As you can see, it's basically the same sort of rotation throughout. The other thing to watch for is if you are deciding to tank it with a physical cover tank without evade, Siren does buff herself, and she does buff her resistance to breaks. So that's something you're going to have to keep a sharp eye on. She does it frequently. She also buffs her resistance to water damage, thunder damage, so you do have to watch for that so that you don't accidentally go in trying to damage her and then deal 0 damage. So anyways, I think that's enough of that. I'll go ahead and see everybody at the next phase. Alright, you can see this turn we are about to close in on the Siren Kill. Maintaining the same rotation we've been doing before, keeping those charm resist up is the most important. Break resistance doesn't really doing anything against us in this fight because, you know, we've got evade and we've got elemental resistance, so you don't have to have break resistance. That's not a big deal. You just gotta have that charm resist and then some ailment resist. And then the other summon for this fight is Leviathan. So if you haven't done it yet at this point, whenever your other support, like if you're following my party, whenever Ignis has a free turn, it's a great opportunity for him to do that. And then 2B is gonna pop off, and her True Charge Blade is such a magnificent skill. It really is one of the things that makes her amazing. It's AoE, it chains super long, fills her own limit burst, it hits 1 billion times, and it is so much fun to use. But now you'll see, now that Siren's gone, Ifrit kind of freaks out. He's an angry cat, and he makes angry cat noises. This is the phase during which you don't have to worry about thunder resistance anymore, because he's not going to counter thunder damage. And even then, if you're following this party, you're not going to be doing thunder damage. The way that we handle Ifrit is very similar to when both Siren and Ifrit are in play. The difference is that Ignis and Nickel are now going to switch roles, and you can see me kind of deliberating a little bit. Ignis goes into full buffer mode. He handles our elements that Nickel was doing, he handles our stat buffs, he gives us some MP, he gives us some HP, he does all this good stuff. And you'll see me Dispel Ifrit throughout this fight. You don't actually have to dispel him. The only turns I would recommend dispelling him are when he buffs his water resistance, because once you pass a certain threshold, I believe, he does begin buffing his attack and magic every single turn. So breaking him, dispelling him is not really going to do a lot for you. And you'll notice once again, now that we are in this phase against him, he's got some damage resistance up, and you'll see that, you know, this chain was incredibly jacked with 2Bs, and that's because one time when I went into this fight, I tried to burst Ifrit real hard, but he's got some hard threshold. Well, they're not hard locked. You can push the thresholds. But if you push more than one threshold at once, he will counter you by killing your entire party. It's pretty horrific, and even with my team full of STMRs, nobody survived. We had people with guts passives who can, you know, they can resist killing blows. They died. Everyone was dead. So do not push more than one threshold at once unless you have a death wish. And his thresholds are at 90%, 80%, 60%, and 40%, if I recall correctly. And that 90 and 80% are kind of the tricky ones, so watch for those ones. I was playing it cautiously. I was kind of testing the waters to see, how much damage can my 2Bs do against this guy. Now, as you can see, this turn, Ignis has got us on our elemental resistance. So now, we're totally covered on elements. Folka is still going to help us with fire because having that little extra bit can be helpful. And Nickel is going to full water imbue mode. So he's imbuing 2B because water does 300% additional damage to Ifrit. So it really does speed up the KO process in this fight. And you'll see like, oh, I did increase damage this time. That was a good 4% through his mitigation. And then when we imbue the other one, it's going to do even more damage still. Now the other tricky thing that you do have to watch for with Ifrit is that once you kill Siren, he enters a 3-turn rotation where every 3rd turn he dispels your party. So you have to be prepared on those turns to re-up your cover with Bosch or your physical tank, whoever it is. You need to re-up your elemental resistance, and you need to start re-imbuing. Now the nice thing is during this phase you don't have to worry about charm anymore. You can totally ignore that if you want to. I was still buffing resistances with Folka, I think just out of rote habit and because I wasn't sure of the ailments that would come out. But I think most of the ailments are linked with Siren, so you may not have to worry about it. But as you can see, we jump right back into imbuing with Nickel. Ignis has already buffed our elemental resist buffs. And if you're using Ignis, I would definitely recommend that you use his cooking skill the turn before Ifrit dispels you. That way, no matter where you're at in your rotation, Ignis is ready to go with an elemental resist buff. And it's honestly pretty straightforward. If you follow this kind of 3-turn rotation very carefully, mind the party dispel, and just keep that damage going, be careful to not push more than one threshold. Because you saw on the previous turn we pushed 1 threshold, we went from, below 80%. Nothing bad happened to us. If you push only 1 threshold, that will happen every time. Nothing will happen every time. But if you push more than 1, you will get your B-hole stretched and it will not be a good time. Now the other thing to keep in mind about Ifrit is that he is defense and spirit breakable, which means if you want to try for a one-shot strategy where, you just kill him from whatever percent and burst him all the way down, that's something you're totally welcome to try. I think for most people it may be inadvisable because if you miss the mark, you're basically guaranteed to die. So for me, I kind of went the slow and safe route. I was like, I'm going to test how much damage I can actually do. Nickel's helping us with those water imbues for the 300% bonus damage. And one other thing to keep in mind is if you're playing to their elemental weaknesses, if you're using Thunder on Siren and you can see on this turn he just buffed his water resistance. So this is a turn where with Folka, it's a smart idea to dispel Ifrit and reapply defensive or offensive breaks, so break his defense again. Because that that water resist buff means you're going to do 0 damage to him, because I believe it's like 300% resistance or more. It's a ton. So and I used Folka's LB in this point as well so that I could remove the breaks on my party, deal a little bit more damage, and basically just continue it on. And I have to say, I'm really pleased with Ignis in this fight. I think he's a really great option because that all element buff is really, really nice. You just got to get past, the first couple turns, and so using him as part of a dual support sort of build, I think was super handy. And this again was a time where I was like, I'm going to be careful with the chains because I've got water imbue and the boss has his defense broken. I'm very worried about pushing more than 1 threshold at once because it really, really hurts. But we'll go ahead and zoom right to the end so that we can talk about the conclusion of this fight, and I'll see everybody there. Now, a habit that I would recommend people get into as they're doing some of these newer and more challenging fights, I would invite you to get into the habit of checking your own buffs and checking the boss's buffs regularly, particularly in fights where you stand the risk of being dispelled. Because if you just for whatever reason you don't notice it because it's not a super noticeable attack or whatever, or the boss buffs itself and you didn't notice, it can spell death for your team. And honestly, that's ultimately how you get past some of these harder pieces of content going forward, is you have to have a keen eye for what's going on. And that's what I like about the design of this fight in particular, is that you can usually watch what's going on. It's pretty obvious what's happening. You know that for the most part you're just taking dark water, fire, and wind damage. That's easy enough to tell, no big deal. Buff some resistance to that, great. It's not like other fights like Gilgamesh that are so unnecessarily complicated that it can confuse you, or you can be like, well, I have no idea what killed me. In this case, you know exactly what's going on. Just check those buffs, check the debuffs, and as long as you're being mindful of those things, it can be a pretty easy clear. I would say the most challenging part of this fight is making sure that you have all of your units geared with the appropriate elemental resistance, or having friends who do. I think that's probably the most frustrating part. It makes me not really want to go back and do this fight again. A lot of people have said, oh, in your Tour of Destruction videos, you should showcase these new units and new fights. And I was like, well, I would, except do you know how hard it is to get a friend unit that's geared correctly? Like, if I want to go back into Gilgamesh Kai, I need a friend with a light weapon and death resist. Or if I want to go into this fight, I need a friend with 400% elemental resistance, or things like that. And it's honestly, it's very deflating. It's not very fun to deal with. But ultimately, like for a one-time clear or a one-time trial, these are really, really fun. And yeah, hopefully that helped clear things up for you guys, helped explain kind of the strategy behind this trial. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Did you like this formatted video? I'm trying to streamline the process for me, because I hope you guys know. Real talk, real quick. I have a new job starting in a couple weeks. Very excited about it. It's going to hopefully reduce some of my stress levels, so I'm a little bit better equipped to, to create more content for everyone. But if not, I'm doing my best to streamline content creation so that I can be as consistent as possible and be as helpful as possible, because, you know, I got started by doing some stylish videos showing how I cleared stuff, and that's what I always like to make. But a lot of people want to know about the strategies that I do, and it's definitely time and labor intensive, but I'm willing to do it. And so if you like this, please let me know. Share your support and love for that down below, so that I know that it's worth my time. And I appreciate everybody so much. Everybody have a lovely week, and stream tonight if you're watching this today on Wednesday the 17th. So I'll see everybody at the stream tonight at roughly, we'll say, like 6:30 PST. So see everybody there.